The Monte and the Pharaoh Show is brought to you by...
Because wine is your second favorite four-letter word. California wine, New York attitude. Good fucking wine.
Yeah.
Welcome
We're
back.
back. Yo,
All right, buddy.
welcome
So,
back.
coming off the possible breakup of the New Day, they've been teasing this for probably close to 2 months now, right, Jimmy?
A little while. Yep, correct.
What are your thoughts on them finally possibly pulling the trigger and breaking up the New Day?
Good. Never a fan of never a fan of the New Day in the first place. Hey, look, I'm not taking anything away from them. They were the Usos' main rival, and it went on for a decade. Correct? I mean, it was.
Well, the one thing I like about today's wrestling is nothing is so cut and dry, right? So,
Right.
like last week, Kofi and Xavier were fighting, and they all had great points. And one was like Kofi talking about the reason Big E and him never took Xavier's words or his guidance is because the guy was like basically a failure, right? He never did anything on his own. And
Right.
Xavier was going back and forth about Kofi being about Kofi. And it's like, as a fan, it's like, they
Good
both
stuff.
have such good points on their stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, Kofi and Big E went on to become world champions, and Xavier never became a champion. So that is a legit point. And if you're Xavier, it's like F you. You know how many times I was an integral part of the New Day? Who the fuck you talking to?
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
I think it's great. It's great stuff. Xavier to me would be the likely bad guy in this situation. Agreed, Mike. I would tend to think that if anybody's going to be the heel, it'd probably be Xavier. I don't think Kofi would make a very good bad guy, quite honestly. And do you have any idea where Big E is at as far as health? Is there any chance of him ever returning? Or I mean,
I actually heard he was returning this week on
really?
Raw. I'm not
Okay.
exactly sure of it, but
Okay. Well, how would you like to see it play out if Mike Monte is writing the script? And how are we working this one out, Mike? Let's play Booker, and not the five-time guy either.
question is, who is the bad guy here?
Xavier.
Who's
To
going to
me.
take the role of
I
the
feel
bad?
it should be Xavier. Kofi is just too damn adorable to his audience. I don't think he would make an effective bad guy. He could prove me wrong. I mean, he's very talented, but I feel like Xavier is the natural fit for that one. What do you think?
No, I think you're right. The question is, what kind of legs does this get? Because we're going to get into the top 10 greatest or relevant tag team breakups. And most of the time, the shit doesn't work. So it's
Right.
like, okay, you
Right.
break up, you have a feud, and then what?
Right. Agreed. Because tag teams, if they're, and I'm assuming that the ones that'll be on the list will be like, some of the great tag teams of all time, one way or the other. It's how they break up. And the biggest problem is that when you're a great tag team, it's very hard to go on and do what, I hate to say it, what Jey Uso has done, where one of you becomes Sean was the exception to the rule. Look, if Offer and Sika broke up, neither one of them, I don't feel, we're going to be like skyrocketed to the upper tier.
Here's the crazy thing. When you
As
start
great as they
looking at
were.
these tag teams, Jimmy,
Yeah.
you start like, again, we're older wrestling fans. So we're
Yeah.
looking at
Mhm.
AWA. We're looking
Right.
at,
Right.
NWA, Mid-Atlantic. We're looking regional. And
Sure.
dude, I was hard pressed to even find a fucking tag team that broke up in any of
Right.
those areas. You know what I'm saying?
Right. It's a rare occurrence. That's why when I looked at the ideas that we were throwing around during our conversations during the week, I was like, man, this is a rough one This is not easy, like naming the top 10 greatest tag teams of all time or the top 10 intercontinental champions of all time or anything. This is was not as loaded as I thought it would be. As far as wow, look at all these breakups of these massive guys who went on to be more massive and all that. There's not a lot of them on that list. I
Well,
don't think.
at number
You
10,
know.
I put one of your favorite tag teams, not your favorite tag team, and that would be Team 3D, the Dudley Boys. We do remember when they broke up, right, Jimmy? What were your thoughts when they broke up?
Annoyed. Uh, didn't agree with it. Although Bully went on to do other good things, as Bully Ray and TNA and stuff. And I enjoyed Aces and Eights. I'm sorry, if people disagree, I did enjoy the whole Aces and Eights thing. Solo career never did Devon any favors. Remember the Reverend Devon thing? I'm like, oh my
Awful.
god.
That was so bad.
Oh my God,
So bad.
so very irritated that they broke up. My second all-time favorite tag team behind Demolition. Very irritated. You just leave that stuff alone. What are you doing? That's the Dudley Boys. All right. They were legends before they even got into WWE and did nothing but further enhance it. They are one of the greatest ever. They're innovators. TLC. You know the history. This is the Dudley Boys.
Right.
Leave the Dudley Boys alone. What the fuck are you doing? So I hated
Well,
it.
I think of
Absolutely hated it.
I think at some point you always got to break up a team, right?
At
At
some
some
point.
point, right?
Right.
But again, epic fail. I mean, Bully Ray went on to be successful in TNA,
Right.
but
Right.
as his WWE career as a singles guy, epic fail for both of those wrestlers, right?
Right. Agreed. I mean, at the end, I don't know about epic fail because I'm probably kinder to TNA than you are. You know what I mean?
Well,
But
my only point is, again, I'm not a fan of Bully Ray, and I'm just being
I
honest.
understand.
As
Yeah.
a WWE, if you're gonna
Right.
measure
If you just
yourself,
stay with WWE,
he was a failure, right? He
yeah.
was nothing. As
Yeah.
a
No, didn't
TNA
wasn't
guy,
working.
he did fine. And
Yeah.
and you know
He
what?
did
Let's
great.
be honest here. If Vince
Yeah.
McMahon saw anything in the Bully Ray character at all, he would have brought him to the WWE. And obviously he
Right.
saw nothing, right?
Right, right. What he saw was just what he liked and what he booked, and deservedly so. He saw the Dudley fucking boys.
What did he bring back the Dudley Boys after Bully Ray's run in TNA
The
as a tag
Dudley,
team?
the Dudleys came back and had a farewell tour. The Dudley boys were
So
received with open arms by the fans. The fans loved the Dudley boys. So
so
yeah, they came.
basically we could say that they were the greatest, if not the greatest tag team of all time. That's up for debate, but hard to
Right.
argue. But
Yeah.
as singles wrestlers, failures.
In WWE, agreed.
All right.
Yeah.
Number 9, Kevin Steen and El Generico are now
Wow.
known as Sami Zayn.
Kevin Owens. Yeah, I remember this stuff because I'm nerdy with the wrestling, and I used to watch Ring of Honor all the time and stuff, and I loved El Generico, obviously, but I really loved Kevin Steen. I was very very intrigued with Kevin Steen from the very first time I watched him. Uh, their breakup in Ring of Honor was epic, but understand that it's Ring of Honor, and I know you know what I'm saying when I say that to you, Mike. I think of all the millions of times they've broken up as Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn as well.
Right.
They have probably one of the longest, most intense friendships, quote unquote, in the history of this business on script. You know what I'm saying? I mean, name me someone else that basically goes back to the days of where they really started together and have been paired consistently together, no matter whether they were on the Long Island Ducks or the New York Yankees.
Right.
This is
Right.
rare. This is rare. This is a great tag team. They are great. Their chemistry together comes from their real life friendship. When they break up, you know how good they both are as performers, whether they're playing a villain or a face. Although Sammy's not really a villain ever when you think about it. Sammy's just, like Kofi in a way. But Kevin, the diversity of Kevin to either be loved or cheered, and we've seen both levels. He's been loved and cheered, and he's been booed and despised. You know, That's a great pick, Mike, by the way, putting them on that list, especially the initial time that you were referring to from Ring of Honor. And look what it led to. What a career with those
Well,
two.
that's what I'm saying. This is one of the times where a tag team who breaks up becomes highly
They,
successful.
successful individuals. So we have huge thumbs up for both of them, you know, as far as their WWE individual careers. Oh, my God. And their time together in WWE. It's a complete, they hit for the cycle, you know.
I couldn't agree more. Next up, the Steiner brothers.
Wow. Now, are you referring to when Scotty goes to the NWO and
Yes.
turns on Rick?
Yes.
It's weird. I guess at the time, okay, I've never been, although I totally get their place in history. I was never a huge fan of the Steiners as a tag team. I knew how
Wow.
great they were. I wasn't. I'm sorry. I wasn't. Forgive me. There are other tag teams I love. I love the Road Warriors. I don't know what you want from me. I love Demolition more. So hate me for that. Or love me for that. It's your call. It's a free world, folks. Um, so when it happened, understand that Scott Steiner, Rick is in the eyes of this fan, back in those days during the wars of the great Monday Night Wars. I felt that Rick was fading away. Okay, watching him on the card, like slowly fading away, and Scott is turning into one of the coolest figures I have ever seen in this business. Big Papa Pump.
Right.
Oh my God. So when the turn came, I was like, good, because I want to see more of where Scott Steiner is heading right now. Scott Steiner was Crash Television before Vince Russo ever even probably thought about it, and he was just it was just waiting to happen. So I was very excited. But thanks to you, I've always loved the bad guys, the villains, the heels. Going back to the days of Morocco and Valentine, I love the NWO. I love the Hogan turn, and now here's Big Papa Pump. Wow, you know, great stuff.
I always look at it like this, Jimmy. I remember when Rick Steiner was like super hot as a dog-faced gremlin in the
Oh,
end
he's
of
great.
Georgia,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
then when Scotty first comes
Mm-hmm.
and they become the Steiner brothers, you could
Mm-hmm.
see Scotty was the real star of the whole
Rick was
of the
Rick
team.
was the big star first. It's odd, right?
Yeah, but it's almost like it seemed like, the rocker type of thing where
That's what I was thinking.
one's a bigger star and then all of a sudden the other guy starts to shine and
Yep.
here
Yep.
you go. And I understand where you're coming from, dude, because I was not a Steiner fan either. Not in WCW. And then when they went
Mm-hmm.
to WWE now, I used to love the Frankensteiner because at that time no one did moves like that, right? So
No,
that
no.
was like the Jimmy Snuka splash, right? It was like you always
Understood.
waited for that move, and if you didn't get it on your weekly show, you were bummed. But
Bro, we go back so far. The Mil Mascara's flying body press.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, exactly.
Failure or success breaking up that team?
Success for Scott Steiner. Failure,
Failure for Rick
failure for
Steiner.
Rick. Period.
Agreed. Agreed.
Period.
Agreed.
Love Big Papa
But
Pump.
as a promoter,
Yeah.
was the right move.
Yeah. In the end, Rick was fading. Rick was definitely fading. There was it just had ran its course. Nobody. I didn't care. I wasn't like, oh wow, it's Rick Steiner, and in the beginning, the dog-faced gremlin. By the way, I was never a fan of Rick Steiner. It doesn't matter, but I remember in the beginning of the dog-faced gremlin, I recognized that the fans freaking loved him, and he was great at what he was doing. I had nothing to do with nothing. But when Big Papa Pump, is coming around, that's the right move. I think it was
So
the right move.
so the other thing too, dude, the one thing I've never agreed with, because it's unbelievable, brother and brother or sister and sister turning on each other. It's just ridiculously stupid, right?
All
The
right.
whole Cain and Abel thing just doesn't really work because it's not really believable to me.
What
It never
about Brett?
has
What
been.
about what? Let me stop you right there. What about Brett and Owen? Come on,
Um,
come on, come on, come on, come on.
that one worked.
Thank
That
you,
worked.
thank you.
I would almost, but I'll ask you this: Booker T and Stevie Ray, did that work?
No, because Stevie Ray's not engaging enough. And it's nothing against Stevie Ray. Stevie Ray was a fucking specimen. I would never ever want to come across Stevie Ray in a dark alley or in a bar or anywhere else.
And I
All
would
right.
say that the Steiners didn't work either. It was an
No.
afterthought. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, now he's in NWO is
Yeah. Look,
Thunder
the
and
big
Lightning,
the,
whatever
the
they were.
big news wasn't that the Steiners had broken up. The big news was that Papa Pump was in the NWO, right?
Yep.
See,
So you're looking so far, we've gone through 3 teams, and 2 of
right.
them have been epic failures breaking up.
Right.
Here's a team that is near and dear to both our hearts, I believe. And I'll just open up and say the WWE Vince had an envisionment that, well, let's talk about it. I shouldn't even say anything. The Dream Team, former WWE champions who lost to the Bulldogs, ended up breaking up, I believe, at WrestleMania 3, which created Brutus the Barber Beefcake and Greg the Hammer Valentine's career slowly dissipated until eventually he was just a jobber.
Well, it's another situation like we just spoke of. I didn't consider the last breakup an epic failure because Papa Pump. You asked me if commercially, businessly was the right move to make. It was. Okay, so here's my take on this one. Yes, it's very similar. Unfortunately, Greg Valentine, like Steiner, it was declining. It wasn't the same anymore. The vibe wasn't there. The interest from the fan base wasn't there. He wasn't being booked as anything important anymore. Uh, some of that, he had no control over, but that's what was going on. Brutus turns into the barber. I mean, that people can say what they want, and a lot of people, I'm still puzzled by it, Mike, but a lot of people talk really poorly sometimes. I see on the internet of Brutus. Listen, Brutus the Barber Beefcake was a huge star. He wasn't a little star. He was a huge star, and he was a star for a little while. Okay, so and necessarily not. I was not necessarily a fan of the character, but he was always around. My favorite of all. We know who our favorite of all is. Brother. You know.
Brutus Beefcake stood alone by himself, and
he did. He
and
did.
again, I love the clarity you gave.
did.
You weren't necessarily a fan, but you cannot deny.
No.
Remember something: if he doesn't get in that parasailing accident,
right,
Ultimate Warrior is not the Intercontinental Champion.
Oh,
it's Brutus the Barber Beefcake dethroning the honky tonk man.
Everything changes. Everything changes, and you know what? To his credit, even after the accident, and as poorly booked as he was in WCW, at least he still was a specimen.
Right.
Give the man a break, for God's sakes, for those people who.
And I'm going to say this too. I was a huge Dream Team guy, and I remember Saturday night's main event, which is returning in December, by the way, to the Nassau Coliseum. It's not the Nassau Coliseum anymore, but they had a 2 out of 3 falls match with the British Bulldogs, if you remember, and they took the first fall.
Right.
And I remember thinking they're going to win back that title.
I didn't feel it.
I got to be honest with you, Jimmy. I know why they did it now, but I felt that team still had a lot of legs on it.
It did. They were great together, and it's the decline that we speak of happened after the breakup.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it was So is it an epic fail that they broke the team up, though? Just like the last answer, I can't say that it was, because then we don't get Brutus the Barber Beefcake.
I guess in reality, Jimmy, the way you're breaking it down, even the Dudleys wasn't an epic failure, because the Bully Ray character, at least for the TNA
did
side,
great.
He did fine.
He did great.
I think the one thing that happens here is when most teams break up, one of them ends up falling off the table and ended up being nothing. Like, not nothing, but their career ends, and while the other one goes on to higher values. With the exception so far, Kevin Steen and El Generico, Sami Zayn, and Kevin Owens, right?
You're right. That's been a clean sweep. Oddly enough, what happens to Xavier Woods after all of this? If dude, he's almost done anyway.
I would almost say, what happens to the entire New Day if they break up?
Right. Well, Kofi must be getting closer to the end of his career at this point, I would think, even though he can still go. Come on, how old is Kofi now? Let's be honest. You
To
know,
be honest, Jimmy, the problem with the WWE too, they don't have enough heels. They
right?
really don't have enough heels. There's too many faces going on.
Yeah, they could use like that guy that throws fans' belts around that they paid $400 for. They could use somebody
Yeah,
like that.
I guess so.
I'm
Next up,
telling you.
the Bella twins. You remember that breakup, Jimmy?
You're going to have to help me here because you've just now listed the ultimate reason why women's wrestling in general was a turnoff to me. I can't stand the Bella Twins. The one time I will give respect was when I believe who fought Ronda, Nikki. That was awesome.
Well,
That was awesome.
when they started pushing Nikki, that's when
Right.
she ends up turning on her sister, right?
Right. Yeah.
Again, very
Yeah.
forgettable.
Yeah.
Very forgettable.
Especially to this co-host. Yeah.
But let
Yeah.
me ask you, even though you hate the Bella twins, you
Right.
have to give them credit for what they meant for the industry, right?
Yeah, I don't want to be like ignorant about it, because then you're not really being wrestling historically responsible. Um, they definitely were stars that transcended. There's no doubt about it. Look, the reality shows and stuff like that, whether I'm a fan of that or not, is irrelevant. Their impact in the business in a positive financial gain way towards future women wrestlers is obvious. That's obvious. Um, but if you keep making me say nice things about the Bellas, I'm going to go have to take some Dramamine because I'm starting to feel nauseous.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Again, I
Still
think
respect them, though. I still respect them regardless. I don't feel that either of them could wrestle a lick. All right. Especially in the beginning. I was like, oh my God, what are you serving me, Vince? That's what I was thinking, Mike. But I did very much enjoy the Rousey Bella match. And I was like, okay, little tip of the cap. Got to give you a tip of the cap. That was good.
I give both those cold girls credit because again, they're like the spark that gets everything going.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Next up at number 5, Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero.
Now, Mike, before we start this, though, what is our final judgment on the Bellas? Is it an epic fail that they broke up because Nikki did ascend?
I think because Nikki did ascend and she was what at the time the longest reigning Diva champion of all time at that point, right?
Right,
So and Bree with Daniel again, they're still
right.
they're Hall of Famers. Can't take that away from them.
Well, a lot of these folks on this list are going to be or already are. So there's
Again,
that too.
honestly, now that we're discussing it, I don't think any of these breakups were a failure for one,
Right.
maybe a failure for the other. In the
We
case of the
really only have
fellas,
one. We really only have one clean sweep, and that's Kevin and Sammy.
exactly. But I would say that in the case of the Bellas, they're close to Kevin and Sammy because that breakup didn't hurt either one of them, and I think
Right.
Bree was on her way out anyway.
Right. Right.
How about
Agreed.
Eddie and Ray?
What for custody of Dominic? Remember little Dominic? Do you remember that kid? Oh my God. Dude, that was one of the most ridiculous angles I have ever witnessed. Why did I like it? Not the angle, but the actual contest between the two.
It was great. It was
Why did I like
great,
that?
dude. How could you deny it? It's like
Yeah.
again, two iconic Mexican wrestlers, right? It's
Lucha
like
Libre de professional, baby.
unbelievable,
Yep.
unbelievable. You
Great.
know, I gotta ask this question, man. I know, like you were a huge fan of Eddie Guerrero, and I was too, right? We talked
Right.
about how jacked up he was when he
Yeah.
came to WCW and all that shit. And
Yeah.
I feel like they're not telling the truth about his death. I don't know why.
Why would you feel that way?
Well, I don't want to
What,
speak ill of the dead, but it's like he got clean, and then he was feeling tired, and then he died, and it certainly can happen. But I almost feel like a lot of times when people are addicts, right, and they break it, no matter 10 years, 20 years. The problem is when they go back to something, they take the same amount that they were taking when they were full addicts. And that's when the body says, bloop, I'm done. I can't handle all this. And I'm not saying he did anything. All I'm saying is I just felt like the guy was in such great shape. I find it amazing Because how old was he when he died? 30 something?
I think he was 38, but Mike, it doesn't surprise me. Eddie did a lot of things to his body that his heart said, nope, no more. I'm comfortable with that. At the end of the day, I don't think there was anything foul play behind it. I don't think that
I
he,
know I'm not saying foul
you know,
play, but I almost feel like
I don't
maybe
think that he
something might
went.
have been going on.
I don't think that he, personally, you're asking me my opinion. I don't feel that
That's
he
fair.
probably went and had a relapse of any kind. I think Eddie lived fast and hard and wore his emotions on his sleeve and
Dude,
did
it's
wait.
just so hard to figure this stuff out because it's like even when we had Barbara Goodish on, right? And I asked her about, hey,
Yeah,
did Frank tell you anything about David Von Erich?
right.
And she's like, nah, I think he just died. But but then you hear the story that Bruiser was the first one in the room and threw all the drugs down the toilet because he didn't want to embarrass the family name. And people tell that story. It's like you never ever really know what the truth is. And I don't think Barbara's lying. I think
Uh,
Barbara's telling our truth, right?
I'll tell you what I think the truth is. I mean, and again, it's just my opinion. But if Bruiser Brody was the only one and the first one to find him, if he's supposedly dumping all the drugs and all that other stuff, who the fuck is he telling afterwards? That would be no one.
Right.
So this to me is just people throwing shit out there and trying to see if it sticks. I don't know where you read it, but that's just my personal opinion.
Well, I've heard it, right? So,
Right,
I've heard it again.
right,
You know,
right.
again, I'm not an expert, so it's like I
Right.
just wonder.
Right. Well,
Number
I mean, I
four.
know that David had a lot of intestinal problems that, as you recall, it's been 8 years now, but I almost died from the very same thing that happened to David. So,
Yeah, no, I get it. I totally get it.
yeah.
And so number four,
Yep.
Edge and Christian. Now, enlighten me on this, dude, because I do not really remember this at all.
I don't either. I got to be honest. I don't recall it. I don't recall it at all.
It happened. Like I remember it happening, but I just don't remember it.
Right.
Obviously, I
Right.
put it high on the list because it's Edge and Christian, and I mean,
Right.
these are two
Was
icons.
was Christian one of the many that were making out with Trish Stratus back in the day, and did she have something to do with it?
Well, I got to
don't
tell you
remember.
what, though. I will say
Right.
this. From what I've read, is Vince was not a real fan of
Christian.
Christian. He just
Right.
and I get it. I
Right.
understand why you wouldn't be. You know what I mean?
Right, right. Like you said, not a memorable breakup. Edge obviously, went on to superstardom. There's nothing to really debate there. Even though I was never a fan of either, by the way, Mike, ever. They used to win those big matches, and I'd get so irritated. I was like, man, I can't stand Edge and Christian. But that was
Even when
me.
he was a rated R superstar, though.
He did nothing. He did nothing for me. He
Wow.
never did. He never did anything for me. I guess the coolest he ever got to me was the whole thing with Lita and Matt. You know, outside of that, he's never done that much for me. I don't look at him. That's funny. I should ask you that. I know how you usually look at what a world champion should look like. Does he really have enough of an aura? I know he's built and stuff like that, but does he really have enough of an aura, or does it really matter anyway? Because the fans fucking love him, so it doesn't really matter what I'm saying here.
So to
But
me, when Edge was the rated R superstar,
right,
he
there
had
was
world
great.
champion written all over him, right?
So there was some greatness. I understand.
I
I
will
got
tell
you.
you this, Christian,
Right.
I was never a fan of. And when they made him the world champion, remember when they brought that big belt? I think he was on SmackDown.
Boring.
I never got Christian. And I got to be honest with you, when I hear the so-called wrestling experts talk about Christian and AEW being the greatest, or one of the great mic men, heels, I'm like, I have not been getting Christian ever. But again, that's me. Am I going to deny the fact that the guy should be in a Hall of Fame? No, he deserves to be just because he was on that tag team. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah, as far as his WWE contributions, absolutely. Because individually, I felt he was a total bust. I don't care if they put the belt on him.
I got to tell you, too, I feel kind of awful that everything is WWE heavy.
Well, to be fair to Christian, Christian's post WWE career, especially his work in AEW, has been fantastic. I am not a fan of Christian, but I am not going to sit here and tell you that he's not done a great job in AEW. He has. He's been fantastic. I never knew that he could be that good. I never saw that side of him in WWE. So I guess to be fair, independently, it's been nothing but a plus for Christian that that happened the day he left WWE. Will he ever return? Well, not at this point, I don't think. You know what I mean? What would he come back with Edge one last time? Maybe. You know, but his WWE career, look, on paper, it says that it was a success. I personally don't feel that it was.
Which I totally get, dude. Which I totally get.
Right. This is not.
All right.
This is not Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn as far as the success level post breakup WWE. That's for sure. Go ahead.
The Mega Powers. The Mega Powers at number 3. Now, I know you always felt they weren't really a tag team, which I totally understand. Hard to argue with.
Right.
Thoughts on the Mega Powers?
Well, oddly enough, even though I never considered them like, tag team like I would when I think of a Demolition or the Road Warriors or, Tully and Arn or whoever, this breakup is the greatest of all the breakups I think we've been to at this point on this list, unless I'm missing something. This breakup was huge. Oh my God! This breakup was larger than life. This breakup was Alfred Hitchcock directing. This was fantastic stuff.
Yeah, no, it was. It really, it should be. Well, it's number 3, so I think that's fair. And by the way, B40 brings up Sting and Barry Windham, Luger and Barry Windham, which is
right.
You know what? I can't believe I forgot about that. Now that I'm thinking about it, like, oh my God, that was one of the great storytelling of all time.
It was. Well, let's discuss that briefly. I mean, what is that? We're talking, what year are we at this point?
It's got to be 88, 87, 88, right? And then the one thing that was wonderful about that, Jimmy, was when, Luger turns on Wyndham and Luger's the heel. And then when Luger and a Horseman get into it, Wyndham comes back to his aid and ends up turning on him and then going to the Horseman. That was some fucking great storytelling, man.
Well, you know what? We just got another tag team where the breakup was a success.
Well, I think one of the main things we're starting to find out here is that most of these tag teams are broken up because they're going to be successful. Just because we don't see the New Day being successful doesn't mean they will be. Odds are I don't think they will be.
Right.
Jimmy. I got to be honest with you.
Right. Yeah, but let's think about it, though. So far, we've said that we've only got Kevin and Sammy. But if you think about it, Lex post-breakup, Barry joins the Horseman post-breakup, correct?
Yeah.
It looks like we've got another win-win.
No, I agree.
All right, so there's 2. We'll call that 10A since we already have our 10. But who's at the next spot?
We've got Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho. You've made the list.
Oh.
And I got to tell you, I brought this up only because it's so recent and it was so good. I mean, to call them one of the great tag teams, I don't know if that would be the case, but, and we all know the story behind it, that it was set to be a WrestleMania main event and ended up being like the second match on the card.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, you don't have to necessarily put them in your top 10 all-time great tag teams, but when you think about the duration of the list and the teaming and the high profile, they were definitely at the top of the card. They were the most enjoyable spot every week. True or false, Mike? For how long? How long? The breakup was unbelievable. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, isn't that when he looks at it, he goes, "Why is my name on this list?"
That was so good, man.
Kabang, Unfortunately, you are aware that how much Vince McMahon hated their match, by the way.
Yes, I've heard Jericho talk about it. He thought it was the drizzling shits for sure.
Yeah, but what a breakup! Wow, is it a win-win though? Ha. How many years ago was this, please?
Got to be like 3 or 4 years ago. Again, my timing could be off, right?
Yeah.
But it's a win-win.
A little longer.
I mean, you know how I feel about Jericho. I think you feel the same. That you know what,
Right.
time to call it a day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you listen to the wrestlers out there, they think he's still doing some of his greatest work. I got to disagree with that.
I disagree with that too.
But you know, but win-win. At number one will be this.
Wow. Ooh.
Number one.
Still looks great today, doesn't it?
It's again one of the great angles of all time.
It's the greatest turn in the history of the business, as far as I'm concerned.
But you knew it was coming, right? You knew it was coming.
Right.
So back to the beginning. This New Day thing is coming. Is it going to happen? I guess is my point. And will let me ask you this. Will tag team wrestling ever be in a place where, how do I put it, that it affects fans like ourselves as much as the Rockers breakup?
Well, it's been in a place a few times in our lives. If you look back historically, the Road Warriors, it was in its place. You understand what I'm saying? The Road Warriors were like a look, as top a tier as you're going to get as a fan, as far as a reaction and everything else. They were the shit. All right, because then you had Demolition, then you had the Hart Foundation, you had et cetera, et cetera. I could go on and on. All right, then you have to wait a little while, and you've got the TLC era, you know, where you do have the Dudley Boys and the Hardy Boys and Edge and Christian. You have that, you know. When will it get back to that again? Honestly, the New Day and the Usos, even though they had a legendary feud, does nothing for me in comparison to the previous timepieces in history that I just referred to. So I don't know.
You just mentioned the Usos. I gotta consider that an epic fail, dude. You know what I mean? I'm not for Jay,
no,
but
for Jimmy.
As far as like the emotion of getting a tag team breakup, see, that's the thing I think we're missing here: the emotion of getting the tag team breakup. Like we went over the Dudleys, nothing there. The breakup, it didn't help at all. Edge and Christian, you know, it helped careers, but it didn't help.
Nothing major.
Like there was nothing there. The Bellas, the Steiners,
Who cares?
You know, You know, to B40's case, probably the most. You know, even the Rockers breakup, it was flat. There was no feud there. It just ended. It was like one went on to heights and the other one went on to where we know where he is, right?
Right. Agreed.
Now, on the other hand, the B40, I mean, Wyndham and Luger, there was some shit went on there for a little while. Like there was investment in on both ends when either one turned on the other, I think, right?
Right. And oddly enough, the Uso match was also very disappointing, correct?
Oh, it was awful, dude.
There you go.
But, you know, then, you know, if you listen to them, their time was cut and, you know, they had all the stuff planned. But I don't feel that people were so much. Look, you got to get, you got to be engaged.
They were not engaged. No, I didn't care.
And I would say Jericho Owens, there was definitely engagement there.
Oh, there was definitely engagement there. You know what? There was engagement, and there was never a breakup. Let me tell you who had the power of engagement. When Demolition stared at each other across the ring because they were the first two.
Oh, that was fucking awesome, dude.
Okay,
that was one of the great.
And that didn't even happen. And that had more engagement than a lot of these.
Well, no, they started beating. They started punching each other. I remember.
Right,
and then,
right.
And then Andre came in and they started beating the shit out of Andre.
Right.
That was fucking awesomeness.
Right. I mean,
I would think I think the biggest one, dude, would be Mega Powers.
Yeah.